This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. Well, he's the ultimate deal maker, and thanks to President Trump and his tariffs, Apple is making its largest ever investment in America.
Today, Apple is announcing that it will invest $600 billion, that's with a B, in the United States over the next 4 years. That's $100 billion more than they were originally going to invest. And this is the largest investment Apple has ever made in America and anywhere else. And it's just an honor to have you. As you know, Apple's been an investor in other countries a little bit. I won't say which ones, but a couple. And they're coming home.
They're coming home because of a president that is putting America first. Also, coming up on the show, Americans are celebrating the reports that Howard Stern's show on Sirius XM is getting axed.
We're going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated. F them, f their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
Good riddance. Trump is back, woke is dead, and nature is healing. Later in the show, we'll check in on the Democrats and the leftist media who are desperately trying to tell Americans that they no longer live in a democratic society.
We have a consolidating dictatorship in our country. And it sounds melodramatic to say it, I know. But just go with that for a minute.
Well, Hunter Biden is back, putting himself in the spotlight after going on an unhinged rant just a couple of weeks ago where he threw all the Democrats under the bus. He's back on Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan's podcast where he spoke about Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, and he talked about what a cruel, cruel 4 years it was when his father was president.
Although it has been kind of a cruel 4 years in many ways, I'm like eternally grateful for right where I am right now. As much as these people have kind of been the ultimate expression of evil, at least in my lifetime, is that it kind of fills me with an enormous sense of purpose.
Joining us now is Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Josh, it's great to see you. So the man with the laptop from hell who got a pardon from the big guy is playing the victim card. But I want to get your thoughts. Why does Hunter Biden keep popping up for interviews? You know, is this his way of fighting Gavin Newsom for the spotlight? Is he going to run?
Look, I think that Hunter Biden is someone, Gabrielle, who literally does not know anything other than the limelight. I mean, this is someone whose father, Joe Biden, was in politics for a half century. I mean, literally from the early 1970s until last year. I guess until earlier this year, January 2025. I mean, this is someone who literally just simply doesn't know any other way other than to try to get in front of the cameras there, try to insert himself into the public narrative. He's clearly a bit of an egomaniac. I mean, I think there's a lot of data points over the years that would give that away. Everything that we know about his various addictions and the laptop there and all of his comments, the media over the years, he just has an insatiable desire to stay relevant. I guess the big question that I think a lot of folks are starting to think is, does this guy actually want to run for office? I mean, it sounds so it sounds so crazy to say. Oh, it's a profoundly scary thought. I mean, I have to conclude that the answer is no. I don't think Democrats are quite that suicidal. They have not learned many lessons from 2024, but surely trotting out, this drug-addled, maniac to run for president is not exactly their best calling card there. But I think it's even simpler than that, Gabriella. He just doesn't know how to resist the limelight. So when someone asks him to come on the show, he's going to say yes.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. We're only 6 months into Trump 2.0, but speculation has already begun about who will be the heir to the MAGA movement. So who will be the Republican presidential candidate in 2028? And Donald Trump was asked about this, and he seemed to agree that J.D. Vance is the favourite.
Do you agree that the heir apparent to MAGA is J.D. Vance?
Well, I think most likely, in all fairness, he's the vice president. I think Marco is also somebody that maybe would get together with J.D. in some form. I also think we have incredible people, some of the people on the stage right here. So it's too early, obviously, to talk about it, but certainly he's doing a great job, and he would be probably favored at this point.
It's interesting. That's a pretty clear response from the president. He didn't really dodge the question.
Well, Donald Trump is not necessarily one, Gabrielle, to dodge questions. I mean, this is a guy who's he's made an entire career basically of calling it like he sees it, going back to the old New York City tabloid days of the 1970s, 1980s. Look, I mean, this was half the purpose of Donald Trump selecting J.D. Vance. I mean, this was half the purpose of selecting someone who was basically, well, half his age, actually. I mean, J.D. Vance just turned 41 years old. So Donald Trump made a decision in selecting such a young vice president of the millennial generation. He was already back then, last summer, around the time of the RNC in Milwaukee, he made a very deliberate, conscientious decision to put a serious thumb on the scale in terms of who the presumptive successor to the MAGA throne would be. Now, having said that, he could have just answered the question and said, J.D. Vance, next question. He didn't say that, obviously. He said Marco Rubio might be involved, plenty of people in this room. It's going to be a competitive primary. This is not J.D. Vance, I think, according to all the betting markets, is the odds favored right now, and that seems pretty clear to me. But it's going to be a competitive primary, and it's also a very, very long ways away at this particular juncture there. And, JD is going to have to pick up some issues, I think, to really kind of double down and hone in on those issues. For the first few months of this presidency, Gabrielle, I think that he was kind of clouded out a little bit by Elon Musk. Elon Musk was not technically vice president, but he was getting a lot of headlines, Doge and all that there. And in some respects, JD was not necessarily front of the newspapers, other than that excellent speech he gave in Munich, Germany back in February. So, now that Elon is out of the picture and we're in the August recess, in the second half of this year, going into 2026, I'm going to be looking very carefully to see what specific issues JD takes up there and what kind of impact he can make on those issues.
Okay, well, let's turn to anti-Israel activist and former Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil. As we know, who was involved in all those anti-Israel demonstrations. And now in a recent interview with the New York Times, he defended the October 7 terror attack by Hamas. He appeared on the Ezra Klein Show podcast, and he said, although he thinks that the Hamas attack that killed more than 1,200 people and captured 250, and as we know, 50 hostages are still being held in Gaza in terror tunnels, this was just a way for Gaza to be heard. Listen to this.
I think it's more the latter, like just to break the cycle, to break that Palestinians are not being heard. And to me, it's a desperate attempt to the word that Palestinians are here, that Palestinians are part of the equation. That was my interpretation of why Hamas did the October 7 attacks on Israel.
It's just so sick. I just don't understand how anyone could rationalize it.
Well, first of all, shame on Ezra Klein. Shame on Ezra Klein for having this person on his show. Ezra has a very highly ranked liberal left of center podcast. This is a disgusting editorial decision to even have this guy on the show in the first place. I mean, he was taken in by ICE. He was in the process of getting removed there for his active support for U.S. recognized foreign terrorist organization there. But, Gabriella, this clip that we've just seen, and it is everything that you say, it is abhorrent, it is appalling. It's worth remembering just some of these very specific things that happened. I've been to the Gaza envelope. I've walked through the kibbutz of Kfar Aza. I've seen the blood on the walls. I've seen the children's toys in the street. I've seen it all for myself. So I would be interested to see if this individual, Mahmoud Khalil, will be willing to look in the face of a grieving mother whose child was murdered, whose daughter was sexually mutilated and raped and then killed. I mean, horrific stuff there. But listening to the specific way that he describes this clip, a desperate act to be heard, I can't help but think of the old Stalinist line from the Soviet Union era, that one death is a tragedy, but 1,000 deaths is a statistic. That's kind of the same mentality that I hear when I listen to Mahmoud Khalil speak. I mean, let's not forget that 1,200 people, roughly speaking, lost their lives. There were 250 others who were taken hostage, dozens, if not hundreds more, who were raped and lived to tell the tale there. He's really channeling this far left Stalinist mentality of just kind of aggregating deaths and calling it kind of just a statistic. It's disgusting stuff. And really, I kind of come back to what I said at the beginning. Shame on Ezra Klein for giving this guy a platform in the first place.
Absolutely. No, I've been to Cafe Azar as well, and the site of the Nova Music Festival, and that has stayed with me there. The energy on the ground there was absolutely terrifying. And yeah, I agree. Shame on Ezra Klein. Now, the New York Times is also reporting that elite colleges, Columbia and Brown, they must disclose their admissions and race data following their settlement with President Trump. So this is essentially because the Trump administration has been pushing colleges to use, wait for it, merit-based processes. You know, what a concept that is, rather than focusing on DEI. Do you welcome this?
Oh, 1000%. Look, I mean, all of this should have happened 2 years ago. It was actually the summer of 2023 that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard College case that so-called affirmative action, aka anti-white racism when it comes to university admissions. The court ruled over 2 years ago that this is illegal, that it violates the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. What Donald Trump did back in January was he signed an executive order, which basically said that according to that Supreme Court decision, we are going to interpret all DEI measures on university campuses, in the federal government, and elsewhere as also being unconstitutional and a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as well. So all of this is pursuant to that, but it should have happened a very, very long time ago. The craziest thing to me, Gabrielle, is, you know, the lawyers, and these are very, very sophisticated lawyers who are representing these universities there. I mean, major white shoe law firms there. These universities are dragging out this process for months and months. In the case of Columbia, ultimately settling for $200 million. Harvard's rumored to potentially settle for $500 million. And literally for what? I mean, think about like what they're actually arguing. They're actually taking an affirmative stance that they have the right, perhaps even the duty or the obligation to discriminate on the basis of race. That's actually what they are doing. A lot of the media here in the United States frame this as the Trump administration cracking down on anti-Semitism. That's definitely part of it, but it's actually only part of it. Maybe even only a small part of it, because the broader part of it is they are literally just saying, as you correctly framed it at the outset, they're just saying you have to abide by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. You have to abide by the 14th Amendment. You can't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, national origin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There, the fact that the universities are fighting this tooth and nail to their seeming death, that's the craziest part of it all to me.
Oh, absolutely. House Republicans have subpoenaed nearly a dozen former federal officials and politicians, including Bill and Hillary Clinton, amid an expanding investigation into pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. As we know, Bill Clinton, he reportedly flew on Epstein's jet, the Lolita Express, up to 26 times. Josh, what do you make of this? Are you confident or not really that we'll really get more information about Epstein and those around him from this investigation?
Well, I personally can't wait to see Clinton go. That is Bill Clinton, Slick Willie himself. I can't wait to see Slick Willie go before the House Oversight Committee, Congressman James Comer of Kentucky. I mean, that's going to be must-see TV. I mean, make me a fat bag of popcorn, and I'll put my feet on the table, and I'll watch that all day long. I mean, you know, Gabriella, when Pam Bondi and Kash Patel at the DOJ and the FBI released, to mixed reaction at best, their announcement that there was no list, that Epstein did indeed kill himself and so forth there, it struck me right away that one of the most obvious things that Trump's defenders should have done even at that time was say, wait, you're gonna say that Donald Trump is covering up because he might be in the Epstein files? Have you talked about Bill Clinton, this guy who was literally on the plane 26 times? Yeah, I mean, the Wall Street Journal currently being sued by Donald Trump there. I mean, they had this article there talking about this, you know, this 50th birthday card Trump there. Maybe he wrote it, maybe he didn't. I don't know. We'll see what the lawsuit happens there. But, you know, on the one hand, you have Donald Trump allegedly doing his 50th birthday card once with like a little, lascivious drawing. On the other hand, we literally know for a fact, based on the manifest, that Clinton was on this plane dozens of times there. So it's really just absurd. Now, where is this ultimately going to go? I don't know. Apparently, there was actually just a major meeting in Washington just over the past 12 to 16 hours or so between J.D. Vance and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi trying to talk about what the administration's response should be to the Epstein files. Gabrielle, my personal take is essentially as follows. I am not a huge fan of the way the administration has handled this. I also think that it is very, very, very far from the median Trump voters' primary concern there. The Trump administration is currently winning on virtually all fronts. They are firing on all cylinders right now. And I think that the sooner they can find some way to try to satisfy all sides, move on, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, finally, it's been revealed and reported that two of the largest banks kicked Donald Trump and his money out following pressure from the Biden administration's banking regulators after the January 6th riots. So the New York Post reports that JP Morgan and Bank of America debanked President Trump. Trump says that he thinks banks discriminate against many conservatives, and the White House is preparing an executive order that'll instruct regulators to review banks for politicised or unlawful debanking practices. What are your thoughts on this?
So debanking has been one of the under-the-radar biggest issues facing America for at least 6, 7, 8 years, give or take. This has happened to a lot. I literally personally know people, many people actually, who have lost their bank accounts, their Venmo, PayPal, or they're just checking their credit card accounts due to their political beliefs. This has been happening actually for a very, very long time. It's really not that dissimilar to our issues here when it comes to big tech, when it comes to being deplatformed or censored or shadow banned there. It's a very similar dynamic happening when it comes to financial institutions. By the way, Gabriella, there's no logical reason why it necessarily has to stop just with banks. I mean, what about your local dentist, your local doctor? Are they going to stop serving you because you happen to be a Trump supporter there? So for all these reasons, I have actually been of the opinion, and I think a lot of conservatives will disagree with what I'm going to say, but I have actually been of the opinion that when it comes to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which we were just talking about in the context of higher education, which essentially has protected classes of nationality, of race, sex, gender, et cetera there. I actually think that rather than try to pull off the impossible of repealing these statutes, namely America's civil rights law, I think it would be a more prudent gesture to actually codify political belief as a protected class status. That would essentially mean that it would be illegal under America's civil rights laws to discriminate against a conservative when it comes to banking, legal services, dental services, accounting, any of the above there, simply because he or she is a conservative. Now, I think a lot of folks would say, you know, what are you talking about? This is all big government, just get rid of it all. Fine. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just trying to live in the reality as I see it. I would love to see more Republicans talk about this, though, because to date, I'm frankly not entirely sure I've heard a single person say this out loud, actually.
Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
It's time for Media Meltdowns. And has anyone checked in on MSNBC host Rachel Maddow, the left-wing host who's been complaining about Donald Trump for a decade now? Well, in her latest rant about the democratically elected president, she discovers that it's August 2025 and every day the sun rises and the sun sets.
We have crossed a line. We are in a place we did not want to be, but we are there. The thing we were all warning about for the last few years is not coming, it is here. We are in it. This is what it likes, it turns out. This is what it's like, right? I mean, it's August, it's a Monday, every day the sun rises and the sun sets, and there are, you know, sports and movies, and there are new hit songs, there are scandals here and there are crimes. There's everybody's personal quotient of family drama and health worries and money worries and falling in and out of love and in and out of faith. Life has not stopped, and none of our personal lives have stopped.
Well spotted, Rachel Maddow. Inspiring stuff. You can really see why she's on an annual salary of $25 million a year. But as you can see, this was just the warm-up before she insists that we're living under a dictatorship and we should be melodramatic about it.
Also, at the same time, life in the United States is profoundly changing, is profoundly different than it was even 6 months ago. Because we do now live in a country that has an authoritarian leader in charge. We have a consolidating dictatorship in our country. And it sounds melodramatic to say it, I know, but just go with that for a minute, right? Think in melodramatic terms, think in cinematic terms.
Rachel Maddow, we're up to almost 200 days of Trump 2.0 and democracy has not ended. Joining us now is CJ Pearson, RNC Youth Advisory Council co-chair. CJ, it is great to see you again. Rachel Maddow is struggling big time. She seems to think America is living under a dictatorship. Can you help her out?
You know, under a dictatorship, I don't really think she'd be allowed to go in that unhinged rant about President Trump. But of course, you know, liberals make their own rules. They make their own definitions. In the same way they can't define a woman, how dare we expect them to actually know what a real dictatorship is, right? I think the only thing Rachel Maddow needs to find is probably a prescription for Xanax, because she needs to calm down. And to be quite frank, this is exactly why no one can take the left seriously anymore. They live in this constant state of just absolute anxiety that it's absolutely not unfounded in any sense or sort of reality. And it's sad.
Well, the Howard Stern show on Sirius XM is set to be cancelled. Now, he was reportedly on a contract of $100 million over 5 years. He's previously said that he hated anyone who voted for Donald Trump and demanded that they stop listening to his radio show, and turns out they did. And he also had this charming message to anyone who was hesitant about the COVID jab.
We're going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated. F them, f their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
And here he is interviewing a barely functioning Joe Biden, absolutely gushing over him.
I know you'd be a good father to the country, and I want to thank you for providing a calming influence, an organized administration post-COVID, getting that vaccine out, getting NATO, getting us to feel comfortable, standing up to Putin. I don't know what people are looking for in a president, or maybe it's that people don't feel like they're getting enough or something. I don't know what it is, but I'll give you your greatest hits.
What stands out to me looking at that clip is just how distracted Joe Biden looks there. Remember, we used to see so many images. He just looks so confused, not really sure if he knows what is going on. But looking at the comments of that clip that's been written up online, people say that he's worse than what's on MSNBC. What's your reaction?
I think you're exactly right. And I think not only the people spoke, but so did the free markets, right? This guy was paid $100 million to spew unfounded lies and to gaslight America about the health and mental acuity of President Biden. And I think people were sick and tired of it, and they were frankly fed up. And he's gone the way of Colbert. He's gone the way of Jim Acosta. And I got to tell you, Gabriella, this is exactly what I voted for these people in the media who have lied to the American people for almost a decade now about the state of affairs in this country, to finally be given an unceremonious exit. And I gotta say, I think a lot of people are happier today than they were when Howard Stern was on the radio spewing his nonsense, lies, and vitriol.
Well, speaking of people with severe TDS, Jasmine Crockett says that Donald Trump has a problem with people of color. Listen to this.
This is a person that has a problem with people of color, period. I don't care how many black MAGA out there with their hats. I want to be clear, when we look at who it is that he's kicking out of this country, is people of color. When we look at who he always disrespects and says that they are low IQ, even though when you look at his cabinet, this has to be the most incompetent cabinet we have ever had in the history of this country.
And I doubt she got a lot of pushback from CNN there.
Not at all. But that's, of course, part of the course for that failing network. But here's what I'll tell you about how President Trump cares and treats black people. I'm someone who's been to the White House on many occasions. I've been to Mar-a-Lago, his personal home, on many occasions. If the man didn't like black people, I don't know if that'd be the case. But let's not talk about just that. Let's talk about what this president has done for the black community. This is a president who delivered criminal justice reform. The first black president didn't even do that. This is a president who's invested billions of dollars into historically black colleges and universities here in the United States. This is a president who continues to deliver for black and brown communities every single day, not because of the color of their skin, because he believes that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so when Jasmine Crockett goes on national television and spews her hate and vitriol, all she's doing is exposing her lack of knowledge about these critical policy wins. And if she would be more concerned about actually serving the people of her district and making a fool of herself on national television, I think the people of Texas would be a lot more excited to have her as their congressman.
Yeah, well said. Now, Trump has announced that Apple is investing $600 billion in the United States, which is the largest investment that Apple has ever made in the US. The tech giant had already planned to invest $768 billion, so this takes its total investment to close to $100 billion. Now, this is going to create around 20,000 new jobs in America. And CJ, this is really what we're seeing as a result of Trump's controversial tariffs. Just in a short period of time, we are seeing major plans for increased manufacturing in America.
Well, 4 words for you. Promises made, promises kept. This is a president who ran on the idea of returning American industry right back here at home. And this is a thing that's actually going to create incredible jobs for blue-collar Americans in the great state of Kentucky. With that, a part of this pledge, Tim Cook also said they were going to make all the iPhone screens and things of that nature right here in America. And this is exactly what President Trump said would happen. And look at, Lord behold, he's delivering on.
He is. It's amazing to see. Now, in the wake of a former Doge worker being beaten by gang members on the streets of Washington, D.C., Donald Trump has indicated that he is considering taking control of the district to stamp out crime. He said that he's considering using the National Guard. Take a listen.
Look at that. In fact, the lawyers are already studying it. We have to run D.C. This has to be the best run place in the country, not the worst run place in the country. And it has so much potential, and we're going to take care of it. You're going to be safe. You're going to be safe walking down streets. You're not going to get mugged.
CJ, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., so I got to say thank you to President Trump for prioritizing making sure that our nation's capital is not another third world country. But of course, under Democrat leadership like Mayor Muriel Bowser, we've seen it decline into that. And so I think, of course, America's national capital should, of course, be a shining city on a hill, just like our country ought to be. And every thug, every so-called youth that wants to torment folks on our streets, they should be held accountable, put in prison, the key thrown away, because that's the only way we are going to solve this problem.
Look, as we know, Donald Trump gets a pretty hard time from the media. Some of the criticism, I'm sure, is absolutely fair, but I don't think he gets enough credit for the humour that he brings to the job. Here is the 79-year-old president on the roof of the White House taking questions from reporters.
Are you considering more renovations, sir?
Are you going to build up?
Hi, sir.
There is no one else like him.
We don't deserve him, to be quite frank with you, right? We went from a president who struggled to walk up the stairs to Air Force One to a president who's now taking questions from the roof of the White House just for fun. It's incredible to see, and it's a reminder of the fact that it is night and day in America right now. And to be quite frank, it's morning in America right now. I think for a long time, we didn't have this experience. And I think the American people welcome a president with the energy and the passion and zeal to deliver for the American people and to implement his America First agenda.
For sure. Now, construction for a new ballroom inside the White House is set to begin in September. It's going to seat more than 600 people, and it means that they won't need to put up a tent when they host state dinners and other functions. But Chuck Schumer, well, he's against it.
The White House announced construction of a $200 million White House ballroom that will begin in September. A $200 million ballroom. Where'd this money come from? Did Congress appropriate it? I don't think so. It's almost like Doge was never about waste at all.
President Trump and other donors have generously committed to donating the funds necessary to build this approximately $200 million structure.
That's right. The $200 million ballroom will be covered by Donald Trump and other donors. And Trump also doesn't get enough credit for donating his entire presidential salary.
No, not at all. And, I would tell Chuck Schumer to put his money where his mouth is, but his money simply isn't as long as President Trump's. This is a president who is, if he wants to improve the White House, he has said long and has long held this fact that he will actually foot the bill himself. He's donated his presidential salary, as you noted, to the White House Historical Association. This is a man who absolutely just does as he says. And I understand that's rare in Washington, but it's not rare in Donald Trump's White House.
Finally, I want to ask you about aliens. A bit left field, but Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard sat down with Miranda Devine on her podcast, Podforce One, and Tulsi was asked about aliens. Are they really out there? This is what she had to say.
So, is there anything? We've had some declassification of some very strange videos that look like they are, unidentified flying objects. Is there anything in the files that you think you could find or you have found?
Nothing that I'm prepared to talk about today.
So watch this space.
Say what?
Watch this space.
We are I'm just going to say this. yeah, we're continuing to look for the truth and share that truth with the American people.
CJ, what did you make of this?
Well, as someone who's watched The View once or twice, I would say that was all the proof of extraterrestrial life that I needed. But, it's interesting to see Director Gabbard speak on this issue. And I trust this administration to, of course, get to the bottom of this. I think there are a lot of valid questions surrounding this issue. And I believe that this administration will continue to act in the same sort of radical transparency that have gotten them to where they are 6 months post-inauguration.
CJ Pearson, RNC Youth Advisory Council co-chair, thanks so much for joining us on Power Hour. Always great to talk to you.
Good to see you.
Joining us now is Research Fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, Mia Schlicht. Mia, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the UK and the protests that took place last weekend, where we saw mothers dressed in pink demonstrating outside a migrant hotel in London. Hundreds of people were there. They were heard chanting "Save our kids" outside the Britannia International Hotel in Canary Wharf. Take a look. So this was what it looked like before the protest was then hijacked by masked thugs who then set off flares and clashed with police. But this hotel is not cheap. A standard room reportedly costs as much as £425 a night. So, Mia, it seems that there's really this frustration that the government is splashing taxpayer dollars on luxury hotels for illegal immigrants. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think people really are quite frustrated with how the UK government is treating this issue at the moment. I mean, we saw this protest, it started out peacefully, and then unfortunately it was hijacked by some very, very angry groups of people, and then there was some public backlash against that. But unfortunately, this anger that we're seeing, it's a symptom of people who are so frustrated that the political class is just not listening to them, and it's not listening to their concerns. And what the worry here is that in Australia, we are very, very close to following this path of the UK. We have this out-of-control migration intake. We're not building enough houses. And as a result of that, the standard of living is falling for both Australians and people who want to come to this country. Now, Australia is a very welcoming and a very tolerant nation, but we have to do these things carefully. It has to be planned for. It needs to have the consent of the community. Otherwise, Australia is at risk of following down the path of the UK.
Look, while we're talking about the UK, there are concerns that the UK's Online Safety Act is at risk of seriously infringing free speech. Elon Musk's social media platform X says that lawmakers made a conscientious decision to increase censorship. The statement says many are now concerned that the plan intended to keep children safe is at risk of seriously infringing on the public's right to free expression. Now, the government has firmly rejected calls to reverse the legislation. It insists that the act is to protect children from harmful content online. But public opposition to this has really grown significantly. An online petition demanding the Act's repeal has attracted more than 400,000 signatures. Mia, do you have concerns that this Safety Act, this Online Safety Act, it might be well-intentioned, but it will infringe on free speech?
I absolutely have concerns about this, and I have to agree with Elon Musk that this is a heavy-handed approach, and it's an approach to censorship. I mean, there's no doubt that the political class has motivations to censor what they see online, because what's happening is the mainstream population is waking up to the fact that our traditional mainstream media outlets are full of bias, they're full of ideology, so they're turning to online platforms like social media in some attempt to engage in a different kind of discourse. And what the political class is seeing is they're thinking, I've got to censor this and control the debate, as they're doing with mainstream media outlets. Now, this happens time and time again. They say it's done in the name of safety. And I think everyone can agree that we want to keep our children safe, but this isn't the way to do it. It's a path to censorship. And we see it with time and time again with things like we call it climate safe or COVID safe. And each time we use this word safe, it's code for government censorship.
I completely agree with you. Looking at the global implications of this, Politico reports that the UK's Office of Communications, which is enforcing this Online Safety Act, has already sent letters to at least 3 websites that are operating outside of the UK, demanding that they conduct harmful speech audits. The letters note that failure to comply could result in imprisonment for a term of up to 2 years or a fine or both. I mean, 2 years imprisonment, that is a serious punishment. But I have to play you what UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said about free speech. He was very awkward.
We discussed the importance of free speech today.
Well, free speech is very important. I don't know if you're referring to any place in particular. Perhaps they are, but
we've had free speech for a very, very long time here, so we're very proud about that.
So uncomfortable. He was so awkward there, trying to pretend that that's something he believes in. But as you point out, we should also look to what's happening here in Australia, because from December 2025, a world-first social media ban will be locking out under 16s out of social media platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Reddit, X, Snapchat, and YouTube. If you're under 16, you won't be able to use it. The Albanese government claims that it's, of course, again, shielding kids from harmful content online. But again, there are these concerns around surveillance, and this could be a slippery slope to censorship.
Well, that's exactly right. And there is so much bracket creep on this stuff. I mean, previously the e-safety commissioner was called the child e-safety commissioner, and now she's the e-safety commissioner in general. Like, there's just no limitations to the kind of powers that these groups impose on themselves. And as I said, it's bracket creep. It goes further and further down the line. Not to mention there's actually no way of even enforcing these new laws. I mean, it's a Trojan horse for digital ID. And the Australian government keeps falling down this path. We saw it. They're censorious in nature. We saw it with the misinformation bill last year that was thankfully rejected in the end, but they can't help themselves.
I want to ask you about net zero. President Donald Trump has scrapped what would have been one of America's largest onshore wind farms. The 1,000 megawatt Lava Ridge wind project in Idaho would have spanned more than 57,000 acres with more than 230 wind turbines. Now, we know that Donald Trump is against wind farms. He absolutely blasted Europe for it last week. Before I get to net zero and what's happening here in Australia, what are your thoughts on Trump's decision?
I think it's a fantastic decision by Trump. I mean, Trump is waking up to the delusion that is net zero, and he's leading the way on this. We're seeing it across even here in Australia. There are so many companies now who are withdrawing their agreements to set up particularly offshore wind farms because they're just not viable. I mean, if you have a look, just this week, there was the Orana Renewable Energy Zone in New South Wales. Now, that was originally projected to cost about $650 million. That blew out to 8 times the cost of $5.5 billion. And those added costs were expected to flow on to consumers. They admitted that. These renewables, they just do not stack up. They don't stack up when it comes to the economics of it or even upholding our energy grid. And unfortunately, it is mainstream Australians and mainstream people all across the world who will get hit the hardest when they're the ones who are forced to pay for them.
And you've spent a fair bit of time with farmers, with people that are being impacted by this push for renewables.
Yeah, that's right. That's been a really big part of our research here at the IPA because there's an economic cost to these projects, but beyond that, there's also a social cost. And it's a cost that so many people just aren't aware of because for so long they've been told that the net zero agenda or committing to zero emissions is the right thing to do. And it doesn't matter the cost because it's the moral high ground. And if you reject net zero, you're some kind of climate denier and you're not doing the right thing. But when you actually head out to the communities who are the ones who are going to have to house this infrastructure, because these wind farms are not built in the inner cities. They're built out in our regional communities, and to connect these wind farms to the grid, you need hundreds of kilometres of transmission lines that cut through farming property. And these farmers, they don't consent to it. And the reaction of the government, instead of negotiating with them or coming up with a better agreement, has been this heavy-handed approach of compulsorily acquiring any land they need to proceed with the rollout.
Research Fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, Mia Schlicht, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
The UK Charity Commission has criticised Prince Harry for publicly airing his dispute with the chair of his charity, Centre Ballet, but cleared the Duke of Sussex of racism allegations. Riley Sullivan is a lifestyle reporter here at skynews.com.au and he's always across the latest celebrity headlines. Riley, great to see you.
Great to be back.
Okay, talk to us about this. Prince Harry, he's been cleared of serious racism allegations. What were those allegations against him and what did the Charity Commission have to say?
Yes, so this is all about the demise, really, of his charity, Centre Ballet. It was a HIV charity that he set up with the Prince of Lesotho back in 2006. It was all about educating and providing support for young people suffering HIV. Very important charity, very much part of his legacy and also his mother, Princess Diana's legacy. She was, of course, such a champion for raising awareness of that issue. So this has been really a demise. It has been sad for Harry personally, and it really played out in the media. The chair of the charity, Dr. Sophie Chandorka, very sort of acclaimed lawyer from Zimbabwe, high profile. She was the chair of the charity. She came out a few months ago and made these shocking claims about alleged misogyny, racism in terms of the management of Centre Ballet and including Prince Harry. So those allegations were taken very seriously. The UK Charity Commission became involved and they have released their findings. The findings said that they didn't find any evidence of racism or misogyny towards the chair by Harry or anyone involved in the charity, but they did caution the Duke of Sussex. They said the fact that it was aired publicly was inappropriate, very inappropriate. I've actually just received word from Centre Ballet. They believe that Harry has not been exonerated in this case. They think that the charity, and this was in the notes, I did look through the Commission's report. The Commission's report said it is not their role to adjudicate claims. So Centre Ballet believes that Dr. Sophie is telling the truth. She stands by her claims against Harry. She's still the chair today and she stands by it. But as far as the Commission's concerned, Harry's clear.
A new royal biography about Prince Andrew and Fergie is continuing to send shockwaves through the UK after more excerpts were published in the tabloids. And you spoke to the author, Andrew Lowney. What did he have to say about the reaction?
Right. Well, Andrew Lowney is really in the middle of the moment of so much attention, media attention in the UK over his new book. It is finally going to be released next week. This is the long-awaited book on Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, looking at their marriage, looking at some of the controversies and also a lot of stuff that's never been aired before. It has been serialised over the past week in the Daily Mail. They've been publishing excerpts from the book and it's sort of been causing a bit of a commotion. But, you know, I did speak to Andrew Lowney and I said, what's your reaction? Because I think one of the big takeaways from the early excerpts was this alleged physical altercation between Harry and his uncle, Prince Andrew. Harry came out and denied that. The Sussex camp were quick on that. They were not happy with that story being out there and they denied it. But when I spoke to Andrew Lowney, he said, again, you know, he was surprised that that was sort of what they focused on. He's always believed that, and I do believe this as well. I don't know if this has been publicly revealed yet, but there's stuff in that book that I haven't seen in the tabloids yet that's really shocking. And he believes that, well, you know, watch out, this is just the beginning. So these early excerpts are very kind of interesting and quite salacious, but it's the stuff that's going to be in the full book, especially around the finances. Big news.
Okay, watch this space.
Yeah.
Now, among the revelations in the book were allegations that Buckingham Palace buried an investigation into claims Meghan Markle bullied palace staff. Why did the report, why didn't it ever see the light of day?
Yeah, well, this has sort of been an ongoing mystery now for a few years. Of course, before Harry and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey, there was these reports that came out in the press about historical allegations of bullying by Meghan Markle towards staffers when she was living at Kensington Palace. She only really lived in Kensington Palace for a relatively short period between 2017 and then in 2020 they left. So realistically, that's a 3-year period. In that time, several staffers allegedly left the employment of the palace because of Meghan's behaviour. That was never substantiated. And then I guess before the Oprah Winfrey interview, it all came up again. And at that time, Buckingham Palace was feeling the pressure. This was in 2021. They launched this investigation. we were all waiting. We were like, okay, what's this investigation going to see? You know, what's it going to say? And then we never got the outcome of it.
Right.
And allegedly, according to Andrew Lowney's book, the reason that they did do that was not because Meghan didn't do anything wrong. I think it would have been, frankly, probably quite damning of Meghan Markle. I think the reason that it was buried was they didn't want to open the Pandora's box, because if they had this report come out saying, you know, Meghan treated her staff poorly, that would kind of open the gates for maybe the Sussex camp to say, well, look at Prince Andrew, or other staffers to speak out. And I think that they just felt, look, we've done the investigation, they did their due diligence internally, but they don't want any of the outcome to come out and they want to move on.
Isn't that interesting? Now, Prince William and Prince Harry could come face to face. This is at their cousin Peter Philip's wedding following his recent engagement. Do we know when the wedding's going to be taking place?
Yeah, well, this was sort of exciting news for the royal family last week, of course. Peter Phillips has announced his engagement to his nurse fiancée, Harriet. They've been together for quite a while. Just a great low-key couple. And in terms of a wedding date, allegedly it's a spring wedding. So potentially we could see William and Harry coming face-to-face sooner rather than later.
Wow.
The last time they were actually face-to-face was for their uncle Robert Fellowes' funeral. So that was also in a kind of church setting. So they'll be back in a church together, possibly within months. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, especially when we talk about things like the Invictus Games in 2027, obviously that's still quite a while away, but I think we could be seeing them together within months.
Okay, and Prince William and Princess Catherine are reportedly planning to leave their home, Adelaide Cottage, for Fort Belvedere, but why are some royal family members convinced that this house is cursed?
Right, well, we were talking about Fort Belvedere as a possible new family home for the Wales family, and it sounds great, you know, on paper. It's a huge property. It's very secure. We know security is very important. It has space for tennis courts, and it has sort of all the facilities that you could ever want. But supposedly, you know, the royal family, the Windsor family, are quite superstitious, and supposedly certain members of the royal family do not like that property because the association, infamously in 1936, when King Edward abdicated for Wallace Simpson, he abdicated at Fort Belvedere. So it has a kind of like historical significance that is not necessarily a good memory, especially for the Queen Mother. So Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, she reportedly was not keen on ever visiting Fort Belvedere. Even when she had friends staying there, she kind of avoided it because I think it just brought back bad memories. So I think for William and Kate, if they do move there, they need to get the sage, they need to sort of cleanse it. But yeah, interesting, watch this space.
Absolutely. Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.